No, not at all.
Okay, all right.
Well, I just joined. Yeah. They use everything done yet, so. It took me an hour and 12 minutes.
Where are you driving from?
Just Flower Mound, but it was an hour and 12 yet. It's like, oh my God, I was listening to good audio over that.
Yeah.
I'm listening to the male archetype, a union analyst. It's very interesting. I think you'd like it.
Well, I just downloaded Headway this morning. So it's on there.
Headway?
Headway.
Isn't Headway a meditation app?
It is,
Or maybe I'm wrong.
growth and performance, through like the book synopsis, so.
I learned the other day that Spotify has a whole Audible book section, and I didn't know that, but it timed me out. Right, like when I was on vacation, I was driving, so like I flew to Portland and it's like 6 hours to get down to the border. And so I was driving a lot, and I ran out of listening halfway through a book, and I was like, well, I don't like this, but it was free, so I'll just wait until they let me listen again.
Well, do you have the Lydia? You know what the.
From the library, yeah.
Yeah, so then I just know how to find books through that. Yeah.
I always tell my clients to get it. The only thing I just, I'm not consistent. So I'll listen to one book one day or not the mood for it the next day. And you have to check it out again over and over.
Yeah,
So,
you give you like 21 days.
yeah, that's it. Which is sometimes fun. Like sometimes I'm needing to learn something more.
Books, all of them,
Yeah, but if it wasn't for like an Audible, I would never. I can't have them down for the ADHD. Well, ADHD brain can't. I don't know how many there's.
I get it.
How did I do that?
I think they just pushed us so long.
I don't think you had a choice, right?
Yeah.
And I graduated #1 and my graduate class for psychology and counseling. Mostly it was just, I was wanting to irritate people. Because
I often tell people I can do all things through Spike.
I can do a lot through Spike. Spike is a huge
All
motivator for
things through
me.
Spike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna steal that one right now. I can do all things through Spike.
I understand that one of the snacks I brought is TikTok sensation, okay? It's Apple, I mean, that's what I heard here. Just FYI, they are Bobo's apple pie stuffed oat bites. And Joe told me they were on TikTok. FYI.
It's all right.
That would be actually a better nut bar back there. Not that everything is a TikTok.
I guess today is that Grant Halliburton thing too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the life teenagers.
Is that what they are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, hey. I'll start now. Okay, so first of all, welcome. Thank you all for joining. I know Dallas traffic is a pain. So we do appreciate you joining us this early in the morning. So if you are hungry or if you want any snacks or anything, water, all back there, as I just mentioned, feel free to grab some, take it all if you want. And then also on the desk, we have QR codes. So if you can please scan that and sign in. It's our way of getting connected with you guys and also so you guys can get connected with each other in case you like to get each other's business cards or anything like that. And also lets us send you guys the recording of the meeting and the presentation. So if you want to reflect on it or anything like that, we'll send that out, I think later this week at some time. What else do I talk about? So for those of you who have been to COMI before, we typically start with introductions. So I'm gonna start first and then we'll go around probably that way. So hi, I'm Cielo Cranio. I am the community health coordinator at MHA Dallas. So basically all I do is grants mostly and stats and numbers and research. So very fun stuff. I'm also a PhD in epidemiology student at the University of Texas. So outside of work, I do that as well. So more numbers, more stats. Great time for me. There I focus on community level mental health prevention. So that's my area of focus because I am in public health. I'm also one of the founders of the new MHA Young Professionals group. So it is a group where basically we don't really have a cap on it, I wouldn't say. So if you feel young at heart, you can join. I don't know if we have an age cap on that just yet. But basically it's just a group so that young professionals can grow themselves professionally, get good exposure to more professionals, just make friends, have some cool time, do yoga, go for happy hour, things like that. So we have some flyers over there, I think, somewhere over there. If you are interested or if you know anyone that is interested. And I was also asked to talk about the peer support groups. So we have, I think it's 3 currently. We have an anxiety group that meets on Wednesdays, in person and virtually. And then we have a new recovery group that meets on Fridays. I think that one is just virtually. And then Julia is starting a PTSD group. I don't know when that will be starting, but if you are interested in joining, it's on our website that you can join through that. So now I'm going to go over here and then we can all just introduce yourselves and then I'll introduce our speaker afterwards.
I'm the Mothers Babies facilitator. Mothers Babies is an evidence-based guided care program which utilizes cutting-edge behavior therapy and attachment therapy and occupational harm reduction. Sorry, I get a little nervous speaking in front of people. I'm also the lead contact for the Evidence and Symposium at Edison.
My name is Luciano Peroni. I work over at Benefit Corp in Dallas. I'm the Director of Development. I like being involved in the community and going to events and learning what is being presented and what is said. So I'm just happy to be here today.
My name is Anthony Vasquez. I'm the ED specialist at Region 2 Dallas. We help with Texas Health Centers and STAR program. We help teens and adolescents and training them to the benefits of in Texas. And it's a challenge for a lot of people to sleep medically, so this is best.
I'm Shari Holmes, and I'm the community outreach therapist at Legacy Cares. At Legacy Cares, we have the counseling as well as the IOP, the therapy, and primarily we work with clients who may be in technical.
My name is Brandon Poland. I am with Medical City Healthcare. I represent all of the health services under Medical City Healthcare here in Texas.
I'm Melanie Grimes, I'm a member of the Community Board of Directors, and I'm a mediator of private practice.
And my name is Lenny Smith. I am program director for an intensive outpatient program for OCD and anxiety centers. So we're focusing primarily on OCD.
Hi, I'm Karen Sendez. I'm a prevention specialist with Youth 180. So we provide prevention, intervention, and counseling services all over Dallas County, Kaufman, and Walpole counties. Primarily, it's been doing free prevention services all over Dallas County, in different schools or community centers, as well as from the program.
My name is Renee Rochen, and I work at Valley Hope, for a treatment facility in Grapevine, Texas. But also besides that, I volunteer on the board for the Texas Family Legacy Program for families that struggle with addiction.
Yeah, will you want to introduce yourself? You walked in the middle of the questions and I didn't want to exclude you.
Good morning.
My name is Pamela Pickens. I wear two hats. One, I am one of the mental health coordinators at St. Luke Community United Methodist Church. And the second hat is I am with Parkland Hospital Post-Acute Services with a emphasis on working with homeless individuals who are high utilizers of PD services and who also go into long-term care.
Okay, so I'm gonna introduce our speaker. Our speaker is Amanda Franklin, who is a professional counselor and sex therapist. If it seems like I'm reading, it's because I have a script here. I want to make sure that I get this right. She specializes in family and partner recovery, narcissistic recovery, religious trauma and abuse, and the disruption of negatively reinforced systematic belief systems. She's also the founder and clinical director of Sessions Wellness Group, and also works with Skyland Trail, a nationally recognized treatment program focused on helping those with mental health problems finding a path to healing. So she's our speaker for today.
I get very nervous, people, just so you know. I also, everybody here seems like they work in the field. And Penny said it was a community facing presentation, so some of the stuff might be more community facing versus more clinical in its approach. And so I might have gotten that wrong. So I did not know. That's okay though. One of some of you know, some of you don't. The reason I'm in this field is for family recovery. I grew up in addiction. It became very personal to me when Al-Anon entered my life and provided me knowledge that I didn't even know I had opportunities to look at life differently or to change or to think differently. You know, you kind of find yourself trapped in the systems that we all live in. And so that's when I spitefully went back to school and became a therapist. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about today, and tell me, I mean, I can talk as I go. If there's other information y'all want me to speak about, or there's something that's more important, I feel a lot of things here are probably evident to all of us. So if there's something that's more important to y'all, let me know. I was just gonna kind of touch on the foundation of what we're working with, and we're dealing with family recovery. And so I think we kind of all have an understanding of what addiction is. If you want me to explain it more, I absolutely will. I am definitely a science-based person. I love learning what our brain does. I also have a degree in theology, but mine is more on the trauma side of it as opposed to the preaching side of it, but I will preach if I want me to. I don't have a problem with that. I love to kind of reframe what you have been taught. And so, but I love how, like when I'm working with clients with addiction, my first book that I have them read before they walk into my office to begin with is Dopamine Nation. It's an amazing book, and I want them to understand exactly what's going on in the pathways of their brain, right? I think that there's so much, so much morality involved in addiction, and I don't think a single solitary bit of it has anything to do with morality. I don't think that anyone wakes up and says, I'm going to go steal today, or I'm going to destroy my body today. I think we get caught in things as a result of something in our brain that kind of takes over. But that's the way that I see it. I can't see that or that. I think we can understand the impacts on all of us, even though this presentation is for the family. There are dual impacts across the board, right? The physical problem, I mean, I think everybody in here knows or has been around someone actively caught in addiction. When I say addiction, I'm including all the forms. Alcohol, chemical, sex, food, work. You know, all of them have the same impact on us. But it leads to, for the addict, physical changes, for the family member, physical changes, right? Like the stress. How many of you have had an addict close to you? Okay. I mean, it really stresses you out, right? Which with over time will create these important or not important, but chronic physical impacts. The psychological impact, the anxiety, the depression, behavioral changes, the emotional and financial strains on family, the codependency and the enabling. The one thing that I like to point out, I do not come from a codependency perspective any longer. I would say when I first entered this world, especially coming in through Al-Anon, everything is about we're often sicker than the families. And I don't think that I was sicker than my family. I think I was learning to survive in a very broken system, doing exactly what we know to do. I also think that when we're dealing with the family side of recovery, it's uber counterintuitive. If I'm married to Brandon and Brandon has cancer tomorrow and I'm taking off work and arranging doctor visits for him, no one's going to judge me for that, right? No one's going to say you're doing a bad thing. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be socially rewarded for being so giving and loving. But if I do those things for addiction, which is another chronic disease is concerned, now somehow I'm codependent, right? And I don't necessarily think that's true. I think we're all trying to do what we know how to do to save our loved ones, right? And I think that those lines can even be a greater intensity when there's a parent involved, right? Especially for moms, it is our role to make sure our kids are okay. And my sons are 20, 22, and 24. They're still my kids, right? Like they're gonna always, to a degree, be my kids, you know? I'm very boundaried as a mom now because of what I've learned, but I don't know what would have happened had those patterns in my own reality not been interrupted. So I come from a very pro-family perspective. I also am not coming from a perspective of cut addicts off. I just don't ever see where, now there's extreme behaviors going on, right? But if we're just dealing with a run of the mill, somebody who's caught in their illness, I don't ever see where cutting somebody off from love is a beneficial action. And so that's kind of how I approach things. So again, tons of different types of addiction. I think a lot of the world, most of us are focusing on chemical or alcohol. I will say without the research being as long-standing, problematic sexual behaviors are probably as high at this point as chemical behaviors are at a much younger age too, right? If we were to see our kids smoking or vaping or drinking, you know, we would freak out. But at 5, we hand them their own other little addiction, right? And don't really start thinking anything about it. Food, but they're all still doing the same thing in the brain. They're providing a solution to the problem, the internal problem of the addict, which is an attachment to self or a connection with self. It is very, I would say in my field, please tell me what you think. I hope the message is changing. But again, the message is definitely that the family really needs, and the family does need work. The family really does need work, but not from the perspective that it's historically come from. You know, it has been studied and studied how much, you know, a family member enables and, you know, they do this thing. And if it weren't for the mom, you know, and her own selfish needs, you know, she might allow the child to do all these things. Again, I think mom is doing what mom knows to do, or partner is doing what partner knows to do. And I really think that we're finally getting to a point in our field where we're addressing the impact the addiction has from a systemic perspective, as opposed to a historical narrative of just kind of overall illness. Just some examples, right? There are lots and lots of examples. I know when I have families come in, in my practice personally, I am a CSAT, so I kind of shifted that. I always say I speak porn and I speak boy. And so I focus on young adult and adolescent problematic sexual behaviors. I don't necessarily do anybody above like 27, 28 anymore. We do couples. But when I see these kids come in, you know, everyone wants to focus on their behavior. And I do believe that almost all behaviors are learned. And so why is kid escaping, right? Why is kid acting out? And when we look at very few intake sessions, are we ever asking children, hey, how often are mom and dad drinking at home? Hey, have you ever seen mom or dad do drugs? It's almost taboo to approach a 12 or 13-year-old child with those type of questions, right? We, for the most part, approach it from a perspective of, why are you not listening, right? Hey, were mom and dad up all night long partying in the living room and you couldn't sleep last night? I mean, very seldom do we ever really take into consideration this much broader lens of family healing. And if 1 in 7 people, right, if that means everybody in this room has somebody close to them who's an active addict, maybe not in your immediate home, but Uncle Joe or Aunt Betty or grandma or grandpa, or even, neighbor across the street, right? Every one of us has someone who's actively in addiction. Another thing that I think is really hard is especially the high functioning addict, right? There are a lot of people that get up and go to work every day, right? They pay their bills. Outwardly, they look great. My community is filled with $1 billion homes full of addicts, right? And kids are just acting out and looking for this security that's not available to them. But there's increased illness, domestic violence, right? How many of you have a close addict? Yeah. I mean, I can remember times in my life not being able to function or think because I was so worried about what was going on, right? I would spend days at work looking up treatment centers for my sisters, right? Or what do we do next? Or which one's the best therapist? Or what book do I need to read, right? Like I just was so preoccupied with what felt like to me, and to a degree is a very real life and death experience, right? My sisters and my mom were all heroin addicts, and all of us know it's just one time, right, that is going to take something that can end their life. And so that's a very real thing, especially if you're a child, right? How many of us have seen kids that are calling 911 because parents have OD'd, right? They are constantly in this physiological heightened state, but the psychological state as well. But these are just the tip of the iceberg. These are the primary problems that we see. For the family member, these are probably the primary emotions. I remember I was 6 months into working my steps with my sponsor, learning, changing, listening, being taught things. And I remember calling her because my boys and I sat down, we played Monopoly and we laughed that night. And that was a very foreign thing in my world, right? Not that I was a bad mom, not that I wasn't meeting their needs, but I was so preoccupied with everything around me that joy was not a part of my life, right? Therefore, it was not a part of my children's lives. And so not only, let's just say my partner is now the addict, it's my partner, it's a great little pattern I followed, was the addict, but that tenseness, that inability to be present, the constant strain, not only those learning behaviors, but they become the norm in home. And so when we look at what's going on with a lot of the family members, I think it's really unfair if we don't address these things. The anger, man, I was mad all the time. Some of it was mad because they weren't doing what I thought. Like if they just went to rehab, everything would be okay, right? If they just drank like me, because I didn't understand what addiction was and that they didn't have a choice to drink like me, right? I don't know. I can, to this day, still go have a glass of wine and my tongue starts hurting, I'm done, right? Where what I understand of addiction now is that option is not available to the addict, but not understanding those things creates a lot of confusion and anger, right? I remember thinking they were the weakest people on the face of the earth. I grew up in the drug world. I've done a lot of the drugs. I've never done the one they've done because I don't want to be like them, but I couldn't do them or not do them. Why couldn't they? Right? Like, for me, it's Saturday night and I had a great time. Now I got stuff to do. It's Monday, but not for them. And I did not know that there was a literal difference that occurred. And so I was always angry. And then I was angry about the bull crap that came as a result of their continued playing and mine stopping, right? Like, one of us had to be the grown up. Guilt is a huge one, right? Guilt is especially for the family. My mom got sober probably 10 years before she passed away, but the enabling that happened for my sisters from her guilt, and this is an addict to addict, was over the top, right? No consequences, no boundaries, no any of those things. And I think sometimes, addiction, it definitely is a generational disease. The guilt from one parent to another, understanding maybe I wasn't a good, or from parent to child, that I wasn't a good parent, this is a way I can make up for it. That guilt is real. But then the guilt of someone like me, who has been a relatively okay mom, who has not introduced those elements into her kids' lives, but then watching a child struggle, and what did I do wrong? How did it go? Where do I need to fix it? And the addict is certainly going to use that, right? Had you not yelled at me when I was a little boy for putting my shoes on, I wouldn't be doing those things. And until we learn how addiction is controlling the mind of the person that we love and not allowing that to control our decisions through sometimes manipulative or shaming tactics, guilt is a very powerful disease. And then it's just that. So like, for example, I had a couple in my office last night. Can I shut this just a little bit? And her husband is, are you coming in here? Okay. I was just about to shut you out. So, her husband is newly sober and, they friend group wants to go to Napa and do a fun little trip, right? And she's not going. And she's sad about that. And she has a right to be sad about that, right? This is not the marriage she signed up for. We didn't know that he was an addict, right? Or it wasn't as evident as it is today, right? And so dealing with the sadness of this, dealing with dreams that are just completely sometimes demolished in the act. And I think when here, pretty much everybody is forward facing, working outwardly, right? To be able to give our clients language for them and let them know it's okay. We spent a great deal of our time last night talking about mourning the life that she thought she was going to have, right? Mourning the child that you thought you were going to have, right? You've got the star football player, kid who one night does something and things go left, right? And mourning that reality. I think that we really need to give our families an opportunity to experience all these emotions because they're real. We also have to teach them that it doesn't belong to the addict, that these are our emotions and they belong to us. And so historically, we've come from a codependency and an enmeshment reality. And I think that both of these things are true. We're done at 10:30. Okay. And so codependency is real, but I don't think just because you have an addict in your family, everybody is codependent, right? There are some very healthy people around their addicts and loved ones. But it can be very detrimental when that element is apparent to the addicts around us. And then the enmeshment, you really sometimes see that the most in the parent-child version, where it is present, that we really have to. I used to give my sisters $20. They would call and be like, hey, we need $20. I knew what they were gonna do with the $20, right? They could tell me whatever they needed to. Hey, I got a flat tire. Flat tires, anybody ever knew, right? But my story that I would tell myself at the time was, well, I would rather give them this $20 than go do something terrible for it, right? And so that's a kind of just a small little example of that enmeshment. I could not undo my own emotion and be uncomfortable with, they might go do some tacky things for that $20, but I'm not going to be a part of it. And so I think helping families understand the thinking around that is going to be powerful as well. So this presentation was designed for families. And so these are the things that I think that are really important to create within the family network. And so we all talk about boundaries. Boundaries are super, super important. But I think we have to clearly address what it feels like to set a boundary, right? It feels more often than not wrong. Very, very wrong to set a boundary, right? It feels like a betrayal. It brings up more often than not the worst possible fears and outcomes and scenarios in our mind. So setting and holding that boundary is really, really challenging at times. Depending on the level or the type of addiction, right? The first thing with families is physically protecting them, right? If I have a family where husband or wife gets drunk and handsy, okay, what are we gonna do, right? Next time something happens and they're maintaining the relationship, or even child to parent and parent to child, right? We so often overlook the abuse of parents because it's the parent, right? But are we providing a personal space of well-being, right? You'll all know fight and flight is probably the state of the home of where addiction lives. And so finding some physical space, letting the nervous system calm down in that person, letting them feel physically safe. I mean, to me, that's a God-given little birthright. We should be able to feel safe. And how do we do that? If they're not gonna leave, okay, your husband is abusive, and sometimes we're not going to be able to, right? Like that's just the reality, especially where there is limited financial resources, social and familial resources. I mean, sometimes it's just a really heartbreaking scenario. And especially with children, where are they gonna go, right? Calling CPS might not always provide the solution that we hope for. Sometimes it might make the situation worse for the child than allowing them not to be beaten necessarily, but to live in a less than ideal environment, right? And so how do we create this well-being for our people? I think that we really have to, physical well-being. Accountability, right? Again, going through, learning these boundaries. Where is my space? Where is your space? What belongs to who belongs to what? And with my clients, we often list that out line by line. Okay, you and him have a car together, right? It's joint in both your names. And you're working 4 jobs to maintain the home, and this person isn't, and you're working the 4th job to pay their car payment, right? Because you're worried about your credit. Let the credit go, right? Let the credit go. Let them feel the impact of losing their car for not paying their car bill, right? Do not pay their phone bill. You know, just little things like that. Learning to teach our clients little ways of accountability, right? And I don't start with, hey, let's run your credit. You know, I start with make them pay half the phone bill, right? If it's your teenage kid, you know, and this is how they're getting in trouble. You know, why? That's a privilege. It's not a right. It's not a right. Yes. The enabling behaviors, right? How am I helping them destroy themselves? Because that's what we're doing, right? We're helping them destroy themselves. My son, who's 22 now, great, but at 17, and I think because of how I grew up, you know, he can always look back and coulda, woulda, shoulda. But he was 17, could see his mental health declining, smoking weed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? And I'm not gonna have this. What do we need to do? Do you need to go talk to someone? You know, our family, like you shake the little family tree and crackheads scurry about in every direction, right? And so my biggest fear as mom has always been not to repeat that cycle. How do I break this cycle in my family, you know? And so probably at that time, some of my decisions were coming from a fear-based perspective. But to tell my 17-year-old, if you continue to do this, you know, we've got 30 days to come up with some changes and make some decisions, or you have to leave my home. And I followed through because our yeses are yes and our no is our no, right? That's the accountability. That's the safety. There is another child in the home and we're not doing this. And I know people can say it's just weed. Looking back, it was just weed. But it was the demise of my kid, right? Like I saw him sinking down, right? Like I saw all these things that At this point, there was really nothing I could do about it. Could I have shipped him off to a treatment center or done things like that? Yeah, but being in this field, sometimes that doesn't solve the problem either. He wasn't ready to be done. He wasn't ready to be done. I knew I had to allow him to get to that place quickly, but it's really, really hard. And so at that point in my life, my involvement in enabling him was I was no longer going to provide him a place to come do that. I was no longer going to provide him a phone or income or car or anything. Those things ended. Wasn't an easy decision, right? Like I battled that one for a year back and forth, hoping, pleading, doing all the things parents do, right? And it is a kiddo. But at some point, those enabling behaviors for me were, he gets to go be an addict. That's the thing I think we have to realize too. It's his life, it's his choice. He can be an addict. That is his God-given right to become whoever he wants to. And maybe he's going to be, right? Maybe that little genetic lineage of ours was just taking shape, and he gets to do that. Hope was, and it worked, is that he would find his way back quickly and, ease out of those. Just again, examples of boundaries, I do think a big one, this is usually where I start with people that, if you're high or you're drunk, can't be around me. Again, those aren't always easy, right? Sometimes we don't always have those options. And so I think kind of looking at your situation and addressing it. And I do think that this is the key point for maintaining and creating change. Is that we have to be consistent, I couldn't give him $20 one day and then not give him $20 the next day, depending on my mood. My decision was there's no more $20, right? And it's hard. I tell families setting boundaries, it's like, how many of you have kiddos? When you give your 2-year-old a toy and then take it away and they scream and it just never ends. And you know that the misery you're both experiencing will go away if you just give them the toy or the cookie or whatever it is, but it's not good for them. And so you sit there and let them scream and cry for as long as they need to. And it's going to be no different when we're changing boundaries in any relationship, right? They're going to up the ante to get their way until they realize your yes is your yes and your no is your no, right? That our no has to be no. And so I do think that when I'm working with families or encouraging them to figure out what those decisions are and what those boundaries are, you have to be prepared to be in that position. It's not always comfortable. And that's a simple start. No more $20, right? No more Cash App, no more Venmo, no more money. And then the texts blow up and blow up and blow up and blow up. We'll block them for the rest of the day. And when you unblock your phone, and if they're still block them again. Well, what if something terrible happens? I promise you some way, somehow, somebody's gonna find you. A hospital is gonna call you, it's not blocked. A jail number is gonna call you, it's not blocked, right? I promise you if something happens, but that fear is so real and so great, that I think kind of baby stepping our way into these changes is a great way, because okay, I cannot give you $20. But then how do I handle the calls? And you're a terrible mom and you're a horrible partner, or that's fine, don't give me the money. Lady next door, she loves it when I come over. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of fear involved, and clearly explaining that we have to be prepared to be consistent. And if you want to give them the $20, give them the $20, but then you don't get to get mad later about what the $20 stands for and represents, right? Either way, make your decision and stick to it, but be fully prepared to carry the weight of either decision, right? There's no right or wrong. I do think it's a very individual family decision, right? There are a lot of people that would tell me, why are you in contact with your mom? Because for me, I wasn't going to cut her off. Now, I might be in between appointments and have 15 minutes to stop in and see her. And that's about the extent of what I could do every week. Hey, I'm just popping by. You good? Do you need anything? You got groceries? How's life? I'm on my way to a meeting. Everyone around me, why have you not cut her off? Why have you not cut her off? That just wasn't who I was going to be. But the pain of that 15 minutes was a choice that I was now making, right? Because it came with a price tag. It certainly did. And then I think it's important to let them know, hey, 30 days. What are we gonna do in this next 30 days? Because if something doesn't change, then this is the next thing that, not for you, for me, right? The boundary is never for them. It is for me. It is always about how do I find my space in this world? Because I think a lot of times families don't feel like they deserve happiness, right? They don't feel, how can I be okay if my kid's out there doing that, right? How can I find happiness if my husband is doing A, B, or C, or my wife or partner, or whoever is doing this? There's a lot of guilt for going back to the guilt, right? There's a lot of guilt in a lot of different ways. You know, I don't know where my kid is at. I haven't seen him in 3 months. And addressing all of those things. But letting people know, hey, we're on a countdown here, you know? You can pay the phone bill or you're not gonna have a phone. Oh, you pawned yours. Well, it's not my responsibility to replace that, right? I don't know what you're gonna have to do, but if you want a phone, I do know this and I love it. Anyone caught in addiction, true addiction, is going to do anything they have to get their needs met. And their needs are always met. Now, their needs might not be my needs, right? But that need is going to be met. They are the most resourceful, intelligent, creative individuals that you will ever run across in your life. And I think that's sometimes what makes it hard too, right? Is because we see so much potential in the person around us that we get hyper-focused on their potential. And then I will say for me, man, I do think, this is my opinion, not every therapist understands addiction the way that I believe it needs to be understood, right? And a lot of conflicting messages are in the world of the family, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. For me, it was real important to have that day-to-day support through like a 12-step community, right? I could call my sponsor and be like, hey, A, B, and C is happening and I don't know what to do. And be it desperation, whatever it was, I listened, right? I realized I had exhausted my own resources and needed help trying to figure my way out of a situation. And fortunately, I landed with people that understood how to help me get out of that situation. And so, you know, I'm a therapist. My clients, I've had 4 texts since I walked in this building with immediate situations. Sometimes I respond, depending on where we're at. Sometimes I don't. But being able to have somebody that they can connect with is super important. And I think that it's important to be transparent with families that you might have to shop around for that support, right? You might have to find different groups and go different places, right? Some people are going to be looking for more of a faith-based approach, and that works for them. You know, some people need more of a structured approach. But I think it can be really hard from a family and a therapist perspective. You get 50 minutes once a week with me to go through all these things, but so much has happened in that week, right? The solution that was needed 20 minutes after you left my office versus what you're coming in with today, you know, may or may not be applicable. And so my clients have to be involved in some type of direct one-on-one support, because one, I don't want them dependent upon me. I want them to find a place to be able to reach out and make sure that their needs are being met. More often than not, the family is never getting their needs met, right? Their lives are placed on hold because everything is revolving around keeping the addict safe or secure or calm or whatever it is. And so teaching families to start seeking for and asking for the help they need is just another way to do that. And so these are things that y'all all know, you know, just making sure. Again, I thought this was not gonna be a room full of y'all. I thought it was gonna be a lot of people in the community. So these are things, you know, more examples of enabling behavior. I tell you the thing that makes me the craziest, and I get it, especially if you're a wife, sending their husband's resumes out. right? Getting jobs for them, doing all those types of things. It makes me absolutely nutty. Because we're taking over the things that we should be doing. We need to allow them to feel the consequence of their every action. I tell my clients all the time that we're gonna set up like a little house of mirrors. You walk into the fair, how do we do that thing? It's the most disorienting thing in the world. Like, I mean, it literally, in my little brain, I'm like, I just freeze because I don't know where to go. But that's what I'm trying to set up, where the only thing they see is themselves, right? Well, it's not, because you can set them up and get a job, and then if you wouldn't have got me this shitty job, I wouldn't be drinking. Or I'm drinking because you didn't get me the shitty job, right? And the minute we get out of their way, you'd be like, it's not my job to get you a job, right? It's not my job to pay your truck payment. It's not my job to make sure that, you have a phone or whatever it is like that. If you're an adult. Now, when we're dealing with little people, those are different conversations to have. And I'm about to do pretty much whatever we need to do to interrupt the addiction in a child. But I'm talking about the little more adult ones, Another one that makes me absolutely nutty is rescue. I can't tell you how many times I bailed my sisters out of jail. I wonder what would have happened had I not done that. And I'll tell you, my motive was never because they were in jail. My motive was because what are people going to think of me if they find out people are in jail, right? And so I think when we're looking at how we're enabling, we have to also address why we're enabling, right? I slept best when anybody was in jail, right? Because they were safe, I knew where they were at. It was good for me. So it wasn't about the jail. It was I bailed them out. For one, I wanted to be the little hero, right? There was a little piece of me that wanted to be the Lord and Savior. There was another piece of me who was more outwardly focused. What is it going to look like to the neighbors or to this or to my partner and his family, right? So I think we have to really start pushing our families to understand why they're doing that. And it's uncomfortable to admit those things. I openly admit it now. You can ask Brandon and anybody knows me. I'm always a little extra because I feel like if I can if people are like, oh, she's talking about this, then maybe it opens a door for them to slowly start talking about this, right? And I also think that I didn't even know to look at it that way until I did, right? When I had to get real honest and be like, my life is better when they're in jail, right? But my little ego isn't, and to begin to kind of clarify what that is, we can look at how to help them kind of limit their behaviors. Another big thing for me is the I statements. Well, I wouldn't be screaming and yelling right now if you weren't doing this, right? No, I'm screaming and yelling right now because I'm a screamer and a yeller, right? I can communicate every single thing without ever having to raise my voice, right? And so, again, asking the family to take accountability. Now, that doesn't mean, and sometimes I'm a yeller. I'm that kind of mom, not anymore, but I was definitely a yeller mom. But only because I tried to get them to listen the first 20 times. See, there's my excuse, you know what I mean? I would ask them 20 times, and finally when the F word and a yell came out of my mouth, I'm like, why are you speaking to me this way? And so, anyway, but we have to begin to decide, who am I, right? I tell families all the time, my example for addiction is like a big giant squid. So, you just imagine this huge giant squid, and we've got Bob, and Bob's the addict, right? And we've got the body of the squid completely covering Bob. We can't see Bob anymore. We know he's under there because his little feet are sticking out, but all we see is Bob, the squid. And then we have all these tentacles, right? There's dishonesty, there's anger, there's manipulation, there's pain, there's shame, there's guilt, right? These little tentacles begin to wrap their beautiful, loving arms around the family. Those little suction cups attached to us and infuse all of that into us, right? So we become those people as well. I think when we're working with the families, and I can't tell you how many email I have read and stalked, I would know he was at and I'm just speaking lightly here, but truthfully, crack house at 3 o'clock in the morning and be looking right at me lying. Oh, I wasn't, no, I wasn't, I know you were there, right? Then if I could find an email or a text message, then I would know, right? You know, like how much we violate our own self-respect in order to know something that we already know, right? And so I think we have to, this I is real important. We have to help families understand, why am I doing this? I already know. It's okay to trust me. It's okay to believe, especially, with all due respect. As women, our intuition's strong. We know, we know. We just have to learn that it's okay to trust what we know. I'm sorry. You too. But it is okay to do that. And even the dads, right? Or the partners, they know when their wife is drinking or out doing whatever, they know. And letting that be enough is important. But you'll know all this stuff. So this is something I think is real important too. Supporting participation. I always go back to, they get to be addicts, right? They have every right on the face of the earth to do that. No matter how heartbreaking it is, no matter how much we hate it, no matter how many prayers we say, they have every single right on the face of the earth to be an addict. And us trying to impose our will of sobriety. Spiritual was a huge violation to me, but I mean, it's just not our place. My place is to decide, am I going to live with an addict, right? That is my autonomy as a human being. And so, lots of families. Now, I do think there's a time for an intervention, right? When somebody is so unable to manage, or we have a child again, right? My 15-year-old were shooting up heroin. I mean, they wouldn't have an opinion of what was going to happen because they're 15 years old, right? I'm going to take them by handcuffs if I had to, wherever they needed to. And they could look at me all day long and say, I'm never speaking to you again. Fine. You don't have to speak to me again because I don't want to speak to your ass either, right? You know, that's usually where most of us are at that point. But the minute they turn 18, I no longer have the right to do that. And unfair as it may say, like I said, I have 20, 22, and 24. I'm more terrified about the decisions they're making now. It's much harder to parent now than it ever was because one decision can destroy their life. Again, not my life. My job is to just love them, regardless of the decisions they make. I know this is going to sound a little dark, but I'm like, y'all can go be Jeffrey Dahmer. I'll come see you in jail. I'm gonna beat the hell out of you the first time I see you because I didn't raise you like that, right? But I'm not gonna abandon you, right? You get to be whoever you want it to be. My personal spiritual worldview is that we're already who we're supposed to be, right? And so who am I to say if that's right or wrong? That's just me. That's where I found peace in my mind. And so many families, my son's 19, he's smoking weed and we're gonna hire an interventionist and maybe he's doing a little mushrooms, right? And we're gonna hire an interventionist and we're gonna take him off to treatment. Is that my decision to make? I don't know. I might put him for college, right? That's my decision to make. You know, my agreement is if you're sober, I'll pay for college. You know, if you're maintaining your life, I'll pay for college. Do I have a right to do that? Does it solve the problem? Does it work? I would say 90% of the time it doesn't work. What would you say? Doesn't work. Yeah. Until someone's ready, all we're doing is creating a deeper canyon in the family system, right? And so we get to support treatment. Hey, the minute you decide you need some help, I'm happy to pay for it. I'm happy to help you sit and look at what you think you need, right? But we don't get to require it. We don't get to coerce people. Hey, I can't tell you the parents I've worked with. They go to treatment, I'll buy you a new truck. Well, that's the thing that we need to do, right? You know, or hey, I'll do this or I'll do that. There's nothing healthy about that. I mean, for 30 days of free food, massages, therapy, yeah. I gotta be sober for a minute. I don't gotta cook, I don't gotta clean, the whole world revolves around me and a new truck. I'll go. And they already know the minute they get out, they're gonna be partying that night, right? We need to understand treatment, right? We need to help and understand, especially our clients, to understand what's appropriate, right? Does a 17-year-old who's smoking weed need to be shipped off to a 30-45 day treatment center? I don't know. Do they need somebody to talk to that can help them understand what they're feeling and why they're doing this and what their motivation is and pros and cons of it? Probably. I always say we can start at the bottom, we can always up the ante, right? And if they're a true addict, they're gonna up the ante themselves, right? Those natural consequences are gonna begin to grow. We're gonna support adherence. Now, what this means for the families, this does not mean, did you go to your meeting today? Have you talked to your sponsor today? Well, why didn't you go to your meeting today? Do you need me to drive you to your meeting today, right? Do you need me to do this? Again, it's only going to create more issues. And more often than not, it will lead to relapse, right? I think not only did I mourn the life that I knew, but I would say the first year or two of my recovery and understanding and learning, I mourned how dangerous and deadly I was to people around me who were in active addiction. And what I mean by that, they'd be trying really hard, but they're not doing it the way I think they should be doing it, right? So I was an N and an N and an N and an N and an N. And if their only coping skill has just been taken away from them, and they don't have the skills to regulate emotionally, or to families, they get out of treatment, wives, husbands, okay, everything's gonna be fine. And then if they walk in the door, they're gonna go back to work, right? And they're gonna take the trash out on Tuesday mornings, and we're gonna make love 9 times a week, and they're gonna be able to be with the kids, and I finally get a break. It's not what's gonna happen, right? And so really understanding what a treatment plan is for a family is real important. Helping families really understand, I tell, especially if we've been dealing with deep addiction, please do not expect anything from your person for the next year to 18 months. The only thing they're gonna be able to do is get through each and every day. And it is not your responsibility to weigh them down with your needs and with your emotions and with your requests and your demands, right? So I think that we have to be real clear what the treatment plan is, because I think families don't understand. Families think, just like I did, they went to treatment, why are they not home normal now, right? Because I didn't understand how powerful addiction was in the brain. And guys, I think it's super important to celebrate it. You were sober one day today. Do you know how many people never experience that day? There are so many people that never get that day. Oh, that's not anything, it's something big. Day 2, day 2000, they're all important days. And I think celebrating that is real important. But I also think it's real important to celebrate that for the family. Hey, it's been a year since you have made an excuse for them, right? It's been a year since you cried yourself to sleep. Like, this is huge progress. We do not have these tangible markers. Like, the one thing I'm always super jealous of in the traditional 12-step communities of chemical or alcohol is they have this hardcore sobriety date, right? The last day I drank was July 1st or whatever, I don't remember the last time I quit giving money, right? I didn't write that down, and nobody's celebrating that with me. I don't remember the last time that I gave myself permission to laugh, right? Because all these are the things that are taken away from the family. I don't remember the day I said that I love all these people around me, and I'm terrified that I'm going this direction now. And if that hurts your feelings, and it means I'm isolated, and for a lot of families it does, right? My sisters are still addicts. I really hope and pray someday they find their way out. They've been addicts since they were 13 years old. They don't know any different, right? But I don't have family, right? And I knew to create and keep this one safe, that one had to go by the wayside, right? And these are big, hard decisions. That's certainly not something to be celebrated, right? That's not something people are jumping up and down saying, woohoo, you don't talk to your sisters. And I do, but it's complicated and challenging. They're heroin addicts. It is what it is, right? And so I don't have those dates to look back and say, you made these really life-altering hard decisions. Like, that's the thing that I'm most jealous of. But I do think it's important that we do that, right? Because it is lonely and it is isolating. And my kids know that they have 2 aunts. I don't know if they saw them walking down the street, if they would know who they are, right? You know, did they remember Memo? Yeah. You know, but was Memo ever available to them? No, right? Did I work really hard to create a world where they felt loved and supported and nurtured? Yeah, but I do think, especially on our side, that we have to remind the families, you're doing good things, you know? And especially when you started, I mean, what? I'm 50, so I'm 20 years into this now. I couldn't see what 20 years would hold by not answering the phone the first day, right? The first time my sponsor was like, don't answer the phone. And I'm like, but what happens? What do we do? How do we do this, right? I could have never known that I would end up with 3 really good kids, right? Who aren't addicts, right? Who are doing all the things that they need to do to take care of themselves. But it is isolating. And so I think we really have to, my time, encourage that and remind them of that. Let's see, again, back to the physical safety, emotional safety. Oh, was that the parenting part? Yeah, this is something I think too. If we have a partner and we're co-parenting someone who's in active addiction, yeah, it's really challenging, right? Super challenging, and equipping them to do that. Again, I know that there's times where everybody's isolated and not in a position financially or economically to go anywhere. But how can we provide that mom or that dad with all the support they need to manage these equations, to provide those kids the safety? I don't know about y'all, but I'm very big on being transparent with the kids. Kids will make narratives. If they don't understand why mom and dad are yelling, right? They're gonna come up with some story. And so, I mean, they're sick. Dad's sick. Mom's sick, right? And giving them something to work with, because that little resentment in their heart only hardens their heart as they get older. And that ripple effect, those little tentacles of that squid are multi-generational if we allow them to be. You know, keeping people safe. I am also not a cut mom or dad out person. If they're in active addiction, we might really limit it. Now, if they're abusive and good, bad, or indifferent, there are levels of abuse, and we are dealing with a very sick system here, right? But, you know, there are 3 times I can remember calling my kids some tacky names, and I remember them to this day, and I have done it, right? All 3 of them were in school drop-off morning, they were being little assholes, they wouldn't get out of the car. Get the fuck out of the car. Whatever came out of my mouth, frustration, right? You know, but there have been 3 times, and I remember one for each of them. It was like God was like, check the box and balance it out. You know, so they all have the same bullshit trauma. So to me, if parent A is the primary sober parent caring for the kids, and parent B maybe in or out of their life or consistently in their life, and maybe they cuss at them a little too much. Is it ideal? No. Right? Is it a reason to cut a parent off? In my opinion, no, right? The wound of parental abandonment is going to be much greater than being called a little asshole from time to time, right? If they're punching their child in the face, we certainly aren't going to leave that parent alone with the child, but that child is always going to crave interaction with the parent, right? So we have to figure out how to balance these really challenging, complicated situations that are super situational. And this is why I think support is real important. And kiddos don't understand it the same way, right? All they see is drunk, happy mom laying on the couch, passed out, and dad yelling all the time, right? And they end up resenting dad when dad was just trying to help them be as safe and secure as possible, right? And so I think we really have to determine what this parental interaction is going to look like, right? If I know my husband is a heroin addict and it's his weekend and I know he can't stay sober, why am I sending my kids to a house for a weekend? Do I need a break? Yeah, absolutely. But I tell this to every woman that walks in my office, addiction or not, the minute you decide to have a kid, please put out of your head that there might ever be somebody there taking care of them with you, right? There are no guarantees of that. The moment a woman decides to give birth, own it, right? And it's beautiful if we have a partner there to do it. But 90% of the time, it lands on us, and we need to be prepared to manage that, right? We need to be prepared to understand, I might not get a break, right? I might not get a weekend off, right? Which are relatively concepts in the reality of the world anyway. But those are the things, right? We're gonna cut them off for having a potty mouth? No. For physical abuse or true unsafeness? Yeah, we might say, hey, you can come and meet us at the park on Sunday at 2 to 4, we'll be there, right? And that might be the way to keep that connection going. And unfortunately, it always lands, on the other parent to manage all this stuff. And it's really hard. And that's why I think making sure that primary parent has a support system, whether it is an Al-Anon or a church family or whatever that looks like, is really important because it is heavy, right? I've been a single mom for 17 years. It's really hard. And not having family, right? It's really hard and it gets really exhausting. And if it weren't for those relationships that I created in my life, I don't know what would have happened, right? Again, I think it's really important to let them know parent is sick, that it is not just self-care stuff. We'll go through this, guys. I'm big on my favorite technique in the whole wide world, and it's been studied over and over. It's an Eastern technique, but there are so many studies. If you Google it, it's a Kundalini yoga and breathing technique. It's 3 minutes of left nostril only breathing, and the way that it completely resets the nervous system is as powerful as taking a Xanax. They have done side-by-side studies, right? So the only way to reset this activated nervous system is through practice techniques, breath work being the most powerful one, or an opioid. Those are our two options, right? And so one of the things I start with my clients do, and I'll tell you, it feels like an eternity, is for 3 minutes, right? And it's slow and it's diligent, but I'll set my little timer there, and a minute into it, I'm like, are we done with this shit yet? I have no patience, obviously, right? But just doing that, having my family start to teach themselves. Sometimes I just present it, do you not have even 3 minutes you can dedicate to yourself, right? Because sometimes we don't, or we haven't allowed ourselves to have 3 minutes. All these things, sleep, eat, move, but that breathing technique, there are so many studies out there on that are so powerful that if I had to pick, it would be that and sleep. Like you can eat Cheetos, you can sit on your couch all day long, but do some breathing exercises and please make sure you're sleeping, right? And finding ways to make ourselves happy. We often abandon ourselves. We can't go out because she's gonna get drunk again and embarrass me in front of everybody, right? We'll leave her ass at home. Things along those lines. I think those are important. I obviously think these things are important. Therapy, but I do think, again, the person needs to really understand what's going on in the family system to be able to adequately, there isn't a broad statement for dealing with these situations. For example, in my practice, there's a lot of porn and sex addiction, right? One of our boundaries might be, don't sleep with your husband again until you have an STD check done, right? Each type of support and therapy is going to be unique to the situation that's occurring. Okay, and I'm done. 2 favorite books. The Codependency, it really gets away from the codependent lens, right? It really helps the families approach this from, I'm doing everything I know to do. I'm not a sick person. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm not codependent. I'm not sicker than they are. There's none of that language that you're going to find in the majority of traditional family recovery books. And so that it's the little book. I'm an Audible, so it was like a 3.5 hour listen. I don't know what it equates to. I've actually physically never seen the book, so I don't know. And then I think learning, this is my favorite book, a lot of, it deals with a lot of how it feels to change the boundaries. So it doesn't just say, tell them no, life is good, right? If we could do that, we would do that. And so she does a really good job of helping families walk through managing the emotional kind of weight of boundaries. And so I think if there was two pieces of information I would give with families, it's obviously these two, right? How do we set boundaries? And then how do I do it when I'm crying myself to sleep? Because I told my 17-year-old, if you don't stop, you have to get out of my house. And I'm laying in bed at night. What kind of mom am I? We just made my 17-year-old leave, right? Like those are heartbreaking scenarios, right? It's necessary sometimes. But how do you manage all that, you know? So I think that she does a really good job of that. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's all. Are we good? Okay. Is it? And I know y'all know this stuff. So again, if I would have known it was going to be professionals, I probably would have brought in different information. But any questions? Anything I can answer? Yeah.
I had one. What was the breathing technique that you mentioned?
It is a form of Kundalini yoga, okay?
Okay.
And it's left nostril only. So if you, and each, like, this is to me super important. I'm probably gonna overstress it because it's super important. So left nostril only, whatever it goes in the brain, whatever pathway directly regulates direct connection to parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, okay? So 4 breaths, if you could do really long, deep breaths in, and then 4 out. Some people do 5, but they don't have that. They're smokers, they don't have lung capacity, you know, whatever. Left nostril. So there's no air coming through your right. You're just breathing through your left nostril. And but you're looking for 4 to 5 tops breaths in and out per minute during that time. So you inhale, hold a little bit, exhale. You'll find your rhythm. But there are tons, if you just Google Kundalini Yoga left nostril breathing scholarly, there are so many studied articles out there about it. And I just remember learning, like, okay, my options are Xanax or breathing, right? I didn't really want either of them at the time because, especially I grew up in so my mom did what a lot of people would do when they would try to get sober, they would go to religion. Ours landed at Jehovah's Witnesses, so that was like demonized stuff, you know, it's all them weird things like that. So having to even overcome those things to start, and it sounds a little guru. My crystal's charging on the window stuff, and a lot of people just aren't open to that. I'm super open to all of it right now, like whatever the hell works, you know, let's do it. And so, but there's tons of information out there, and it's very powerful, but it needs to be practiced every day. And then it's also a good kind of PR it, right? Okay, I'm really stressed out right now. I can take 3 minutes, go to the bathroom at work and breathe, you know. Any other questions I can answer? Yeah.
I have one. You had a great illustration about the squid and Bob.
Mhm.
Okay, so tell me again, because I may be confused. You said that when the squid wraps around Bob, he's supporting or being,
Gotcha. So I'm Bob, okay? And I am not an addict at this point, right? And then I slowly become an addict. So the squid is kind of covering, you know, like the squid has that really long body, right? And so it begins to cover Bob. So we're gonna say squid is heroin addiction, okay? All you see is heroin addiction, right? You don't see Bob anymore. Bob's there, Bob's real. We know Bob is in there, but we are unable to connect with Bob anymore because we have this whole barrier of squid in front of us, right? And then those little tentacles that are the squid, right? What happens with addiction? It's just destruction. It is pain. It is manipulation. It is shame. It is lying. It is betrayal. All those things begin to do what squids do, right? Wrap their arms and look for things to hold on to, you know, and if that's my child, then that's what I'm going to give my child. Not because I'm a bad person, but because I'm currently a squid, right? And I think, especially when I'm dealing with my kiddos, I use that example the most. Because they know this is not the dad or mom that I used to have. Where did they go, right? You know, and I'm like, dad's still there, right? I'll do everything in my power to prevent resentment from forming in the heart. I think that is very deadly to the human psyche, soul, ego, whatever the hell you want to call it, whatever language you prefer. But so if we can create some compassion for dad, right? While acknowledging the squid is kind of running the show right now. Dad's still there. He's just really sick right now. He's got this really heavy squid on him. And you do crazy things too, right? If you have this heavy squid taking over your body, right? Because they don't have a language for it. They don't understand it the way that we do. But at the same time, I don't see where hate ever does good to anybody in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So if we can kind of just reframe it in a way that understands, that's where my squid came from.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. I was thinking of squid being the protector.
No,
But it's not.
Squid is the
It's-
addiction. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have to say, and I'm probably gonna butcher it, but you said something so amazing that stuck out to me is that you were talking about how the addict is like, you were pointing out how they're brilliant and they're smart and they're all these things, right? And you mentioned that if they need something, they're gonna do whatever they need to do to get what they need, right? I love that you're speaking to communities, and I hope you're doing it often, because to look at that from a point of view of when they're ready to get recovered, they're gonna do whatever they need to do, and they are resourceful.
And not a minute before.
Yeah, and I think that families need to hear that, because a lot of times the family feels like they are gonna be able to be that person for them. And they are resourceful, and when they're ready, they're gonna find those resources to get better too.
I would say 99% of the time, the family is not involved in the recovery, right? They ran into a friend or they went to an AA meeting and it stopped, right? When they were ready, when they've had enough. And I think that's a big number. And families get real resentful of that, right? And we have to kind of address that too. I have spent $100,000 on Jamie's treatment, you know, and little Susie shows up and Susie does all this stuff. Okay. When your end result or your goal, sobriety and health and wellness, or is it was you wanted it to come for you, right? You know, and so I think we have to kind of point that out to families too. So I would say probably a year or two into recovery. And I don't like to admit this, and I didn't know it at the time, so it was completely done in ignorance, right? I wanted to be the one that helped my sisters, right? Not from some God perspective, but I just wanted to be that person, right? And so I finally kind of had to accept that I'm never going to be that person. And I'm not, like, I will never be the one that bring my sisters to recovery. We can't even talk about it, as a matter of fact, because I have so many boundaries that I have been indoctrinated by the cult of the 12 steps, right? And I'm like, no, I'm just not doing what you want, right? And so, but that also, that's a little thing. But there was a girl who, she was early in sobriety, and then she asked me to be her Al-Anon sponsor because she was dating a guy who was also in recovery. Her story is not mine to tell, but she had a very profound event happen to her child. She literally walked barefoot from Denton to detox, what is the Pine Street in Fort Worth, walked barefoot because she didn't have shoes, because that was her moment, right? And there was something about that I was like, there wasn't anything anybody could do prior to that moment. And she knew where she needed to go. And I tell this to parents all the time. They know where to go. They know how to find an AA meeting, right? They know somebody who's gotten sober, because I guarantee you a sober person that used to run around with them has reached out to them saying, hey, you want to come to a meeting with me? I was like, they know exactly what to do. Now, the 19-year-old who went a little left on Adderall at college might not know exactly what to do, right? And that might be where the family comes in and says, hey, let's begin to get some resources. But I would say for most of them, they know exactly what they need to do to bring sobriety into their life. And I don't think that there's anything any of us are going to be able to do to help them make that decision. What we can do My favorite line in the big book, is to the family, it's on page 117. But it says, we encourage you to try our program for changed attitudes can aid recovery, right? Now, what I heard was they're gonna teach me how to do something to get my people sober, right? Like, that's what I heard. And that's what I think even kept me coming for a while, is if I just hear what they're telling me, I'll be able to do all this stuff, right? But what they were telling me is that I'm going to be able to love my sisters, and I do, right? All the time, I go meet them in their world. I'm not a sober person, not a big drink person, but they spend their lives in a very different world than I do. And I don't go to where they live because it makes me uncomfortable and I feel very unsafe, right? But I will go meet them at the hole in the wall bar at the street and I'll have a beer with them, right? And I think a lot of people would be like, how can you do that? Well, in my family, it is the only way I'm gonna be able to connect with them and love them. Now, I'm not there all night long. I don't got 20 minutes like I did with mom. But I only have about 45 minutes or an hour that I can pop by and have beer. I needed an excuse, guys, because my kids, when they were little, that was the excuse. Like, I gotta go, and I gotta go. I don't have that excuse anymore. So if y'all have any, send me a text, please, and let me know.
You need the grandbabies, send the grandbabies.
I don't have any, not time, don't speak that. I would still beat the hell out of each other. I'm like, no. But someday, yes. But right now, I'm without excuse, you know? So I think I have 2 jobs, so my current excuse is, you know, I have to work. But I forgot where I was going.
Well, I just want to make a comment, and, just in terms of what you're saying, just that balance between boundaries and unconditional love, because I think when they're ready, that is the motivating factor for them to, like you said, they know it,
You know?
and so I just love how you still love on your mom and give her that unconditional love, even if it's that 15 minutes. And sometimes that, it seems like that's what, you know, in the end, that's what they remember when they're ready to get.
Well, and the reality is my mom has passed away, right?
Oh,
And that's okay. But there's nothing. I have friends that went no contact, and the weight that they feel for never having connected with their mom, right? I'm so thankful I don't have that. One of my biggest things I think I had to overcome is I always, and who doesn't, like to this day, I still have a fantasy that I get to go one day with my sisters and we get to go do normal girl stuff. We'll go get our toes done. You know what I mean? Or we get to take sister trips on the beach. In no way, shape, form, or fashion do I ever actually sing it happen. But there's a little piece of me. Look at these 2 amazing sisters. They are talented and brilliant and beautiful. And they are victims of my mom's addiction, right? That is the absolute truth. She shot them up. And this happens a lot. We see this with our families, right? You know, she was the one who introduced heroin to them at the ages of 11 and 13 years old, right? And so I have great compassion for choices that were robbed of them, right? And which is why I think my wanting to save my sisters was so important to me, right? You know, like I wanted to be the surrogate mom or do whatever bullshit was going on in my head at the time, right? But my mom was a very sick person, right? And I'd always held hope that we would have this connected relationship. But when I began to look at where do I end, where does she begin? Amanda's value is I will never completely shut the door on these people, right? I may boundary the hell up, but I will never shut the door. And with my sisters, so the last time one of my sisters was at my house was Thanksgiving 5 or 6 years ago. My God, I'll never forget this. And I thank God I can laugh about it. So the youngest sister and my brain were always 12, but she's 40, 42, so that she's 30 something. She comes downstairs with my son's PlayStation, just holding it, right? You know, and I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, well, we're getting ready to go. And I'm like, well, where are you taking that? And she was like, taking what? And I'm like, the PlayStation. She's like, I don't have a PlayStation. And then my boys are like, Aunt Jody, you're holding my PlayStation. And she's like, no, I'm not. I mean, just because that's how sometimes sick they can get, right? Like, we're all standing there. I even took a picture of her and said, do you see that? Right? that's the PlayStation, because I will always, for the sake of their dignity, that is one thing that I know I did the most, is I took their dignity away from them over and over and over, which there is nobody torturing themselves more than an addict, and I certainly don't need to add to that. So I will always, because my values say I know the reality, I don't have to be right in a situation. I have the opportunity to be loving in a situation, right? And so I was like, maybe I'm losing my mind. Like, maybe I'm schizophrenic and I'm seeing shit, but I was like, let's take a picture, you know? And I was like, okay, it's in the picture too. So by the grace of God, I've been given the ability to navigate these tough situations, right? Like, she's standing there holding it, you know? And the boys are, oh, you're taking, I mean, it's just chaos in my house, right? Where there's a squid, there is chaos, right? And it's Thanksgiving, and my ego is roaring in the background, like, the one time I let him in, look what happens to me, no good deed goes unpunished, right? You know? And so I've got the ability to manage all this noise, right? But I'm never going to take her dignity away, right? And then there was like my other sister, God bless her. She is probably one of your utilization people at Parkland for drug-seeking behaviors, right? And do y'all know what a teratoma is? You know those little hair babies? You see people like they pull them out, like they think it's a tumor, and it's like a ball with teeth and hair. You know, it's been on some Discovery Channel thing. I don't know if it's real. I'm sure there's an article about it somewhere. But y'all know what I'm talking about, like in general sense. Okay. That girl has got more teratomas than anybody on the face of the earth, right? Like, anytime she calls from the hospital because she needs $20 for an Uber home, right? And I'm like, well, what's wrong? Right at the hospital. I know what's going on. I know she doesn't have access to anything to help her feel okay. I don't shame her for that. She's doing what she knows to do to survive. Then she'll be like, oh, they took a teratoma out. I'm like, another one? Oh my God, Jamie, like, what happened? You know, like, where do they all live? Like, were there going to be 80 y'all or something? You know, like, did you get, you know, and I don't dehumanize her. I know what's going on. There is absolutely zero to be gained, because I know that nobody wants to be sharing that story, right? I also know how delusional thinking becomes when you're so lost in addiction that you can't see anymore, right? And I think that's something that's real important too. Now, it's just how I've had to survive to live within what I decided for me, right? But I do think, like, you're going to hear some of the craziest stuff I know that you probably do too, right? Like, you probably hear things that would put my little teratoma stories to shame, you know? But it is my privilege to be able to have the skill set now to allow them the dignity to be whoever they want to be. She gets to be teratoma girl. You know what I mean? I get to be possibly schizophrenic because I'm the only one perhaps that sees the PlayStation. You know what I mean? You still don't get to walk out of my house with it though, right? And I'm not going to make a big scene about it, right? And I'm going to look at you and be like, hey, don't do this to your nephews, because that works with them. They still have a lot of love, right? They're not without love. They just can't access it because the addiction is more powerful, but it is there, you know? Or I can just be, I cannot send any money for an Uber, but I'm sure Parkland has resources that will be able to help you get home. Would you like me to connect you with one of the caseworkers there? No, I don't need your therapy bullshit. Okay. Let me know if you do. You know what I mean? Like, and I do tell that to families all the time, because that shame, that anger, that guilt, and that is the prominent emotion, right? I'm angry. I'm angry that you're lying to me about some bullshit. I'm certainly angry that you're taking my kid's PlayStation and I have to work 2 weeks to afford that, you know? And you're just gonna walk out the door with it like, we don't see you, you know? All those little violations over years and years. And think about this in a therapeutic perspective too, right? These little kids that are coming in with these behavior issues, right? Are they being violated in those ways, and they don't have a language for it or a voice for it? And we're dealing with a very manipulative parent who, well, I took this away from them. Well, did you take it away upon it? And you know what I mean? Like, but it's really hard to ask those questions, because then you lose access to the little person who needs love and care and support, right? It's such a complicated little world. So If I can ever help with anything, fine to do. And probably take me 3 or 4 days to respond to your email. I'm just being honest with you. Y'all need me, text me. But anything else I can answer? Okay, thank you. Did I have a little bit of weirdness?
I'm gonna stay seated, if you don't want to get up. But, thank you all for coming. We have COMI every third Wednesday of every month. So we should be having one next month as well. We would love for you to join us, for that one as well. If you're thirsty, you want some snacks, please, we have a bunch back there. Feel free to take some. If you didn't sign in with the QR codes, please do that as well. It's how we can get you connected with each other and you can get connected with us as well. Sit back and then work, do whatever you want. Get some snacks, drive home safely. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. It's not summer, guys. Yeah. I'm not